Well, I'd just like to welcome, excuse me. Right, sorry about that, start again. Welcome everybody to the meeting of the Gloucestershire Economic Growth Joint Committee, Wednesday, 16th of September. Nice to see you all. And we'll go straight into the meeting. First item is apologies. Joe, do we have any apologies?
We have no apologies. Cathy O'Leary from Stroud District Council is unable to attend the meeting, but Andrew Cummings will represent Cathy at the meeting. We'll need to just keep an eye on the quorum of the meeting. We have a couple of members who may have to leave a little bit early, but we should be absolutely fine. Thank you.
Can I just share Christine Gore sends her apologies, and I'm covering for her today.
Thank you, Philippa. Okay, we've got a few more joining us. Okay, the next item is the morning, Colin, is the minute of the last meeting, and the last meeting was 28th of July. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes at the moment, or any action points or anything to note? Can't see anybody waving or speaking. Gillian, do you want to just tell us about the decision that we made, and if you could just take us through that then, Gillian?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. It was just to update members. Back in the summer, members will recall that the committee supported an extension to the committee for a further 18 months. And I am pleased to report that all the partner authorities fully supported that, and the legal formalities were completed in early September to enable the committee to run through now until March 2022, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Gillian. And just on that note, we did also do a press release on behalf of the committee by GCC and the comms team on the 17th of August, relating to our economic recovery service and the 3 C's of collaboration, communication and confidence. So anyway, next item then is declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration we need to register? No, can't see any hands, nobody nodding. Okie doke. In that case, we'll go straight on to the next item. These are presentation items. So the first one is the Golden Valley Cyber Central Development. And we've got Tim and Reed who will take us through the presentation. I believe you've all had a link to the video. Very nice video, Tim. I love the James Bond helicopter piece. That's excellent. But it was actually a very enlightening film, and I think it's a great job in promoting the development. And I believe you've got a PowerPoint which you've also sent around, and I think you might be displaying that in your presentation. But anyway, I'll hand over to yourself and Reed to take us through it.
Okay, thank you. So I think first we'll just introduce ourselves. Tim Atkins from Cheltenham Borough Council, and
Reed Darby, also from Cheltenham Borough Council.
It's working and on to come with us from GCHQ. So we are here just to give you a quick feedback about what we've been up to and some of the economic impact this cyber growth is having an impact on the county. So we have got a presentation, so I am going to now attempt to just share with that, so if you bear with me a moment. So hopefully everyone can see this, and
we can see it, Tim.
Yeah, excellent. Right, so obviously part of this was about the branding, and this is the brand that we've come up with about the wider development, which is Golden Valley, home of the central UK. That term could obviously be used in a much wider context, to enable growth. I'll take you there to what happened back in December. The Growth Committee kindly agreed to provide us with some funding to help us understand the economic evidence and impact cyber has on the county. Secondly, to get a better sort of deep understanding of the market and the demand, and also then help us promote that market engagement so that we could do it with some element of prestigiousness and impact, and then finally get some good quality marketing material that could be used on other aspects. So this is really an opportunity for us to give you a bit of feedback on how we've got on with that, and I would say at this point the outcome of that has been exceptionally powerful. So I'm hoping that when we come to questions, you'll all be reasonably blown away about what is going on in Gloucestershire regarding cyber. So for a start, we engaged with Hatchery Generous to undertake a impact study there about Gloucestershire and the impact that cyber and the digital sector has upon it. The methodology is set out there, which is a sort of usual methodology, but the point here is this is a detailed piece of work, a robust piece of work, and it's evidence-based. So what we all now have are some outputs from that, which we can actually use with some confidence. So here are the big factors. So some of the knockout messages here that you will see from this chart is that Gloucestershire is 6 times the amount of cyber specialism in the UK than the norm. So that it is punching well above its weight. And that is the second largest concentration in the UK outside London. So that is enormous for Gloucestershire. And then we look at Cheltenham, and that score in terms of business concentration and density, if you look on the chart below, is 11 times. So we have that epicentre of cyber growth outside of London, which is something that we kind of had the feel that we had, but we did not have the evidence for. So if we go and look at a map here now that shows you the concentrations around the UK, obviously that really strong point there in Gloucestershire, which is the most concentrated. And then we look at productivity over there on the other side, is that, you know, these are some really powerful messages about productivity, because these are generally higher value jobs and has a big impact. So they in this sector, we are above the UK norm. I'll take you now through to the sort of the high value of this employment growth on the numbers in terms of jobs. And the thing that I think we really want to point out here is not just the fact that we've got more than the average, percentage-wise. If you actually look at the chart on the right-hand side, the 15% of businesses, but it's the actual number of jobs. 48% of jobs, Cheltenham, 34% of jobs growth in the 5-year period. So that is meaning that businesses are growing and the number of jobs are growing. This is not just small startups that start and disappear. There is sustained growth over that 5-year period. So that you know, I think that is really important for this committee and the county. The impact that Cyber Central will have on this. So this is a sort of view into the future about if we deliver this development well. What are the numbers there? So up to 3,700 homes, you know, almost 12,000 jobs, gross, almost 500 million of gross employee wages there. It is a really big impact as well. So I think the key here is that they feel that if we get this right, the impact that this will have on the wider ecosystem and the wider economy will be significant. Right, Reid, I'm going to pass on to Reid now, who's going to talk to you about the market in some more detail.
So I guess one of the things that people have been quizzing us about is why has no one really known about this before? And I guess GCHQ has been in the locality for over 60 years at doing its thing. And what's happened, I guess, is that the ecosystem has developed over that time. Looking at the research, what this does actually is situates us for strategic growth, and being in proximity to GCHQ is really important. It's going to be the right place going forward. And this is a quote from Matt Warman, the digital minister in DCMS, they have woken up to the fact that not only is GCHQ here for national security and the ecosystem around it, but it's actually going to be part of the recovery and the economic growth for the next few years. So if we look at some of the details in the next slides, so cyber sector is doubling every 2 years, and it's valued at £8.2 billion in the UK. It's the UK's fastest growing industry, and this fits quite nicely with the central government's sort of strategy for making the UK a science and innovation superpower. And the UK mission to be the global leader in cybersecurity and cyber is really important. And of course, Cheltenham and Gloucestershire, we're right at the heart of that. And that's the takeaway here. We're well positioned to help lead the UK out of recovery. Next slide. And in terms of some more of the context, a number of you will be aware of the government's comprehensive spending review and the integrated review for security, defence and foreign policy. So this is where government decides what its priorities are and how to allocate money for government departments and agencies. And this goes across all the departments. And this is all publicly available information. You can Google this and have a look at the government's website. What they've basically said is that there's a number of key themes: strengthening the UK's economy and the economic recovery from COVID, levelling up economic opportunity outside of the South East, across the UK, making us a UK scientific superpower, strengthening our place in the world. And particularly when we then look at national security, defence, development, etc., resilience is really important. And that science and technology and sort of data capabilities are important. Then we've got the industrial strategy. So this is another new government strategy for research and development. Cybersecurity is at the heart of that. And then we also have the UK's national data strategy. So there's a lot of focus on our sector, and that will come with money. So what we're expecting is the spending review will be published, I think, in November, and that's when all the government departments and the supply chain for GCHQ and so on will find out, what they need to do. They're going to have to step up, and that means we're going to have to step up. So having Cyber Central ideally placed to support that growth is really what we're about. Next slide. And then just to put this in context, this is all about scaling. How do we scale what we have to do something of national and international significance? And it's great that we're now part of Western Gateway. So a number of you will be aware of that wider region. This is the same sort of physical footprint as Silicon Valley, but within that region, we've got quite a lot to offer, particularly with the cyber sector. Next slide. So the Western Gateway are also bidding for funds and resources to scale up the economic growth. And it just so happens that within that, cyber is one of the crown jewels of that bid. So we're already playing our part within Gloucestershire for that wider Western Gateway piece. And then, just to sort of gloss over this, we're starting to see this when it comes to sort of digital and digital growth. This is an extract from the Digital Nation report. So we in Cheltenham and Gloucestershire are already making waves for economic growth that's based on science, technology and digital.
Right, so another part of what we received some funding for was to assist us in our campaign to launch the Golden Valley development because of the wider impact from it, and also get some high quality marketing material to enable us to promote the opportunity. So we went ahead with that. We employed a company locally called Asher, who've done a fantastic job of really putting this message out there. Those of you who possibly saw the video, I hope you did, and if you haven't, I would really ask you to watch that video link. It's only 2 minutes. That has had a profound impact on us being able to get our message out there. We had the support of the Department for International Trade, and internationally we've got some really good feedback from this. We looked here, so this is just some of the examples of some of the things that we've been doing. It had a real prestigious feel about it. We launched a magazine that was widely circulated, and there's a quote there at the top of the page that says, quite possibly the most rock and roll trailer for the most rock and roll project. Now, that's the kind of feedback we were hoping for, and I think the feedback we got, was in one of the other magazines, I think the Estates Gazette, pretty much said, I can't believe a local authority is leading this, because this is just so not local authority. So I think we have definitely put Gloucestershire on the map here of something that is really interesting that is happening, and that was exactly what we were hoping to do. So we can use that, and we can use all the bits of this material to then help us. I think the question that comes to the end is, well, where next? How do we use this? This was an idea. We were going to launch this at MIPIM. So Robert Jenrick was actually going to announce our market launch at MIPIM. Unfortunately, MIPIM got cancelled. We were going to have this VIP event that we were going to announce with the minister there. Didn't happen, but actually, I think us launching this during COVID when there's a lot of economic uncertainty has given it a lot of strength. We did some market testing with others. We felt actually it is the right time to do this. The need for cyber is growing at the moment, and the need for office space, which is co-working, which brings people together as part of a pioneering environment, is exactly what people are after. So we've launched, and so far that has been very successful. Reid's now going to just talk through the offer. This is about the proposition that we're taking to the market, because it is housing, it is employment, it is lifestyle, but at the heart of it, there is this proposition that no other part of the UK has got, and that's what we're feeding off to.
Again, this is based on the research that we've been doing over the last few months. So we've got 6 value propositions here, and I'll go through those each in turn, starting with GCHQ. So GCHQ, it's as I think I said last time, it's a national organisation with an international dimension that's locally based. So the amount of investment that has been coming into GCHQ is quite incredible. But it's not just about investment, it's about people, it's about culture, it's about solving some of the biggest problems. And what that means is that GCHQ has been creating a lot of value, a lot of intellectual property, and that's trickled out into the wider ecosystem. So having GCHQ in our region is fundamental. I should also mention GCHQ provides leadership in academics. So we've got the 19 ACEs nationally. These are the academic centres of excellence for cybersecurity research. And so they provide all sorts of value. And also, interestingly, in cybersecurity, government is the biggest buyer. And, GCHQ is one of those key clients. Next slide. So as well as GCHQ, we've got this incredible ecosystem that we've talked about, that we've been doing the research on. This just gives you a flavour of some of the big companies. We've got international technology companies on our doorstep, the likes of IBM, Microsoft, BAE, etc. And they don't talk a lot about what they do, but they are here. You just need to Google. If you Google the jobs in Cheltenham for technology and cyber, you'll be interested to see who turns up. So we've got a lot of those international companies, but we've also got SMEs and startups and all sorts of other third sector companies all supporting the ecosystem. Very, very diverse. And then, of course, geographically, we are ideally placed to be the heart of innovation and academia and talent for the cyber sector. So even just within so many miles, we've got 19 universities within 75 minutes drive that are all working on problems and research and development that is relevant for the sector, and also the talent pipeline. We've got, I mentioned these academic centres of excellence. So to become an academic centre of excellence, that's a very high bar that the NCSC sets. You have to have world-class cyber research. And we've got some in our region. And then the pioneering skills work with Cyber First, apprenticeships. We have been piloting that in Gloucestershire for the nation. So very well placed. And then in terms of location and accessibility, we've got some really good infrastructure in place, and you all know about how that is growing, whether that's the M5, or the airport, and just the connections to the railway station. We've got better connectivity to London and north. So we are actually very well placed for that location and accessibility.
Okay, and so as Reid's saying, a lot of this is about us promoting a little bit more about how great Gloucestershire is, and I do think we are sometimes not the greatest at doing that, about how well connected we are. If you actually look at the direct trains you can get from Cheltenham Station, you can get direct to all of those places. You add Gloucester into the mix of that, about some of the other parts that you can get to it. We are very well connected. We've got a motorway going past it. We've got an airport on the doorstep. Sometimes, that's a lot, considering a major development site sitting right next to all of those. Leadership, that was one of them. So quite often many schemes fail to deliver. They put forward a vision, but they don't have somebody backing it. At the moment, we have a 200-hectare site next door, of which Cheltenham Borough Council has bought 45 hectares to deliver the first tranches of this. The LEP put £22 million in of works which the County Council are in the process of delivering on the site. Cheltenham Borough Council have put in £180 million through the HRA and the General Fund to deliver investment in housing to get this going. We've also got CPO powers between ourselves and Tewkesbury because the wider site is split between the two. And, we are working on this together. And then we go down in March, we got the £220 million announcement from the government for the HIF, of which the County Council are leading on and will hopefully be delivering very shortly. So there is a lot going on in this sector, and the government there is about the investment of £1.9 billion in cyber, but that doesn't actually pick up the stuff which is in this round of the spending review, which is significant. So just to give you all an idea of scale, on the left top corner you can see the Golden Valley site, 200 hectares, but just to give you an idea, that is the City of London next to it and the Olympic Village on the far right. You've got the University of Manchester there and other tech parks, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So this is considerable. So the ambition and things that we could deliver with this site are really large. Reid's now going to talk to you about Silicon Valley because he knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, I mean, so we think about Silicon Valley, what it is today, but it did start as a very small place. This is the garage. I think it's a Hewlett Packard's garage. But in the 30s, there was not a lot going on the west coast of the US. But over the years, with a lot of government investment and universities, tech entrepreneurs, etc., this is what we have today in Silicon Valley. Now, we don't want to copy Silicon Valley because there's a lot of things that are not good about it. We want to do our own thing. But what is our vision for the region? What are we going to do in the next 5, 10, 30, 50 years to make Gloucestershire the place to be? So, some of the components. We talked about GCHQ. We've got a bunch of really smart people in the donut. They've done all sorts of stuff that is really interesting and useful and productive. We want to take that and apply that within Cyber Central. Bringing the academic centres of excellence together, bringing together academics and the GCHQ folks that have mission problems to do some knowledge exchange and incubation, and then with business as well. Again, the large companies, the small companies, the people hungry for growth, bringing them together in ways that hasn't been done before is where we're going to start to see that serendipity and that growth. And then to support that, we've got all sorts of other components that we've been working on, things like the Spy Museum, we're calling it broadly the agency at the moment. This is about creating an all-year-round destination for people to come and visit, as well as looking at how we do skills for young people, etc., etc. So it's about all these components, bringing them together in meaningful ways.
Okay, so just to give some impact about what's happened over the last 6 months, we do feel that a lot of the stuff we've been doing has had an impact. So some examples of things that are going on nationally that Reid's already talked about, but I'll just give some little elements there. And I don't know if Dev is on the call from the LEP, but the Build Better Fund, which was originally the stimulus fund, I think in total there were about 20 submissions. I think 3/4 of them had digital or cyber cores around them. 4 out of the 5 actual funded schemes are cyber-based schemes. We would not have seen this sort of interest in that sector if we go back probably a year and a half ago. We've seen £11 million focused on cyber and digital sector for those bids that were put in. And then only recently from Gloucester, so obviously John, good to see the forum coming forward there. Again, a stronger, more focus on digital, focus on cyber. So it has having a big impact. And then we look at what's happening in the Western Gateway. We feature heavily in that proposal from them, which, bearing in mind the Western Gate was pretty new, it's good to see that we've got some influence in there. And then obviously we've had a lot of commercial interest in the Golden Valley and Cyber Central. And you put that against what's happening on the national picture, the comprehensive spending review and all the other aspects. This is important, and this has got significance to our future growth. So just giving you a quick summary about what's going on our timeline. So go back, this is historic, looking backwards, 2015, this all began when George Osborne announced at GCHQ, the Cyber Innovation Centre. But quickly we go through, takes us up to where we are now. March 2020, we got the HIF bid announcement, so things were really beginning to come together there. We purchased the site, and the Garden Communities announcement, which is Homes England support for the delivery of homes. I'll take us into what's going to happen in the future. Obviously, well, this is slightly April 2020. We did our launch. Our procurement to get a development partner is well underway now. Comprehensive spending review, hopefully announced in November, which should be very positive about cyber sector and growth of some of the partners in Gloucestershire. And then we go through to delivery. So we're hoping to be on site in 2021, and we're hoping to have operational buildings 2023-24. That is the plan. So I think just a final reflection for everyone. This is the money that the committee has given us to help us move this forward has had some real impact. It's enabled us to put the message out there, and we have now got international recognition about what we're doing, and there's a lot of interest and a lot of people looking over the wall. From an innovation point of view, we have got something which is truly unique that Reach has been talking through about that bringing together of GCHQ's innovation, academia and business. You build a community around that is going to have a real impact. There is a chance of us leading something on national recovery here. There is a lot of interest in how we link all these things together, and I think there is an opportunity for Gloucestershire to really make something of this and drive this forward, because it has got that strong policy alignment. And from a post-COVID point of view, we've got a lot to offer there. There's the levelling up agenda, lifestyle patterns, people working from home or looking for a different place to work in. And again, from a locational point of view, Gloucestershire has a lot to offer. So I think the reflection is if we look at that, we look at the spending review, we look at the narrative from the government about being a scientific superpower, wanting to be a global leader in cyber security, Gloucestershire has a lot to offer in this. And not just to offer, we could actually be leading this mission. So I will leave it there. I will stop sharing the screen, and we will be able to take questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation and very exciting news and some great stuff in there. Just before we go to questions, I would ask, as usual with these online meetings now, if you've got a question, if you could raise your digital hand, I can see then who wants to speak. And also, once you've spoken, then if you could take it down, just so we know who's left to speak. Before we go into questions, though, John McGinty, you've put a question on the chat. Would you like to ask that question?
Thank you, Chair. I was just asking Tim if he could clarify, when you use the phrase cyber, do you mean cyber security, or do you mean something more broadly on the digital agenda?
Can I pick up that one? So yeah, we get this question a lot. What is cyber security? What is the cyber tech sector? So the way I see it is that cyber security is a vertical sector that we are at the heart of. But actually, cyber, like the term digital, is used horizontally in other sectors as well. So we don't want to just be narrow on cyber security. We want to make sure that the work that we do plugs into those other sectors. So absolutely, cybersecurity, yes, but it's both and. And in terms of where the boundaries are, I mean, that's all very uncertain, because I have done some research on this. Like the term digital. What does digital mean? So I think for us, we need to make sure that we don't lose the focus on cybersecurity, because that's really important. But we also want to be open to other things. For example, resilience, digital well-being, data security, plugging into the sort of digital sector. So I think if we get this right, it's both and rather than either or, if that makes sense. The other thing I'm doing is commissioning a bit of work with academia in our region to look at the narrative around Cyber Central and cyber, because there is a lot of confusion there. And in some ways it's an unhelpful term, but it's a term that we're stuck with, so we need to make the most of it.
Thank you very much. Can't see any hands up. Does anybody else want to ask the guys a question on Golden Valley? No, sounds like... Oh,
Hello.
Thank you. Really interesting presentation and very exciting. It's nice to see how impactful Gloucestershire is. I had a question really, because obviously we're supporting this as a committee, sort of a bit of a feel for obviously Cheltenham is very much the focus, but how you see this fitting within the rest of the county. I was just down visiting the Gloucestershire Science Park down at Berkeley just last week, and obviously there's some things going on there. So, and looking at what your breakdown around, obviously there's a concentration in Cheltenham, but you could see actually within the whole of Gloucestershire, there was again quite a lot of businesses. So just to feel for how will it impact on the rest of the county, not just my own district, but are there other sort of centres of concentration in other parts of the county, and will they be seen as a significant satellite to what's happening in Cheltenham? So it's not that Cheltenham is just the only one and those others feel a little bit like Cinderella, that they're not also a central part of that. Obviously, going back to the point about working from home, I suppose the sell for us in Gloucestershire is it's the quality of life. So you might live in Stroud or the Forest, but you work with Cheltenham, so it's not necessarily about all focusing it all on in one area.
Absolutely, it's a great question and really important. So Nick and I from the team, we visited Berkeley just a little while ago, and we went to the new Seren Centre, the police headquarters, and we looked at the SGS work that's going on with the school there and C11. And I think there is a real opportunity, particularly for that centre, looking at more sort of cyber physical things and maybe there's the sort of energy piece. So absolutely. So I think as we sort of develop, each of the different localities will have particular strengths that we can draw together. And part of what we need to do, I think, over the next year or more is to look at how these components all fit together. Because when you look at the opportunity, there's going to be too much for everybody to do. It's going to be, we're all going to have to scale up here. So we all have to work out what can we do in our locality. In Berkeley, again, what is it that they're good at? What's the opportunity for them? And how do we then link up? And that's linking up physically in terms of infrastructure, roads and so on, but also digitally. So where are the networks that enable us to connect up across the region? Because at the moment, where's the social media platform or the private platform for all the people working in cyber all across the region? We don't have that yet. So there's a bit of digital infrastructure that I think that we need to start building, and there's lots of opportunities there.
Thank you very much. John, you've put your hand up again.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether our own University of Gloucestershire has got any aspirations to be an academic centre of excellence in this area. Do you have any conversations with them?
So again, Nick, my colleague, he's leading the academic piece. So he's been talking to Kamal at the university. They are involved quite heavily with the Cyber Wales and West bid and convening that group, and that includes, Bristol and Bath and so on. So they are involved, and they are very excited about the opportunities there.
And I would say we are, we work very hard to try and to knit that together. So there's benefit for the local university, but bringing in the expertise from the others. So the West. Wales and West scheme, which was part of a Strengthening Places bid, has now expanded. So we're bringing in some others. So that would include UE, who are
with Glasgow,
and also the University of the South of Wales, isn't it?
Because there's three elements to the academic piece. There's the research, which is sort of at the heart of where a lot of the innovation comes from. There's the FE piece, which is about skills, and because the talent pipeline is fundamental for all of the growth. And then there's that innovation, because universities have the accelerator programs and so on, sort of growth hubs. So we need to make sure that we get the three aspects together. You'll have to talk to University of Gloucestershire themselves if they want to apply to become an ACE. NCSC are very keen for universities to apply for that, it is a possibility if that's what they want to do, but that would require investment from them, and it's hard work. But everything is possible.
And it is, I would say, it's a big issue for us because creating that focus for us at Gloucestershire as being this academic centre of excellence around this sector would be huge for us.
If you look at Cambridge, for example, they've got Cambridge University. They have research institutions for all sorts of different sectors. We don't have a physical space for, different academic centres to come together. That's one of the things that we're exploring for Cyber Central, is to have a space where different academic institutions can mix alongside industry and government. That will be unique, particularly focused on cyber. And University of Gloucestershire are part of that, along with Glasgow and UE and others.
Terrific, thank you very much. Dev, you fleetingly had your hand up. Do you want to speak?
I did. Yeah, it was to do with the Strength in Places Fund, actually. But then Tim sort of jumped in and mentioned it. In answer to John's question, yes, the University of Gloucestershire, they definitely aspire to be an ACE university. But as Reid also said, there's a huge amount of investment needs to go into that. GCHQ don't give it out willy-nilly, but the university, they're aspiring to it, but there's a long way to go to get that. But I've got a meeting with them tomorrow about this Strength in Places Fund, the bid, because it's a £50 million bid to have a new facility on the cyber park. And again, because of COVID, there have been delays, but they're still in the running, and we're hoping to hear whether they're successful by the end of the calendar year.
Can I pick up on that, Dev? So I think absolutely. One of the things that we've learned in our research, having buildings is really important, but it's also about having the right people and the expertise and the networks. So there's a whole lot of other things that we need to put in place, particularly if we want to get NCSC sort of accreditation, and that we have some incredible folks in the region, but so the buildings are important, but it's it's the people as well, attracting them.
Terrific, thank you very much. Philippa.
Just a quick question. Incredibly helpful and exciting presentation, and I think it's really timely for us in Cotswolds because we're in the final stages of preparing our new green economic growth strategy, and what we'd want to do is link in with you and have a kind of two-way conversation to make sure we capture the elements of your plans within ours, so it gets wider visibility there, but also talk about the opportunities that we think we have in our area. But it would be really useful if I can pick up with you after this meeting just to make sure we join all that up.
Yeah, big pleasure to do that.
Okay, terrific. Well, I don't have any more hands up now. Does anybody else want to question the guys on the presentation? I'll take that as no. Well, once again, thank you both. Oh, no, Rob Bird, you're now waving. Rob.
Thank you, Patrick. Sorry, it was just that I couldn't find the appropriate button to raise my hand. Sorry, but thank you for watching. So if I could just perhaps just relate this to the wider context of the development, and just ask, because what we're talking about here is sucking in a lot of finance, resources, and people, talent, etc. And I guess a lot of that will depend upon us being able to provide the housing for them. And so it's just really a question about ensuring that as well as the if you like, the commercial technical aspects, that there is a clear that the housing, as well as the other things that we've just talked a lot about, march in step effectively, because I guess, and I'd be interested to hear what Tim and Neil have got to say about this, unless we provide the housing, it will act as a blockage to or at least it will slow down our aspirations for all the commercial and technical development that we're talking about. Is that a fair comment, Tim?
Absolutely. We got a problem in the county about housing delivery anywhere, and housing. You can't make the two have a relationship together. So we very much see this. So fortunately, part of the project, has got the Golden Valley development. I know we're talking mainly about the cyber element of it, but that is employment. It's an employment-led housing scheme, frankly. So the Golden Valley scheme is one of the Homes England's Garden Community programmes. Around in the whole term, 3,700 homes as part of that delivery, and you'll see the point that we, as a council, are putting in up to almost £200 million to support housing delivery to make sure it is, and 50% of the land that we have purchased is earmarked for housing. So that's not us relying on the market delivering it, us actually getting involved to do exactly what you're saying, because there is that problem. Obviously, we can't solve the big picture all ourselves. We've got to allow the market to get on and do that. But literally just up the road, you've got North West Cheltenham, of which we've got an outline planning application is in for the first part of that, so that the houses are there. But I think it is a challenge for us going forward to make sure that you can't have one without the other. And your point is very valid, and that's one of the big challenges. The reverse sometimes happens if we leave this to the market. And this is why we bought the land, is you might just get the housing and you don't get the employment. So it's making sure that we get that balance right. I'm not going to pretend that it's going to be easy, because, as we all know, building houses at scale in Gloucestershire isn't straightforward.
Which is really what was driving my thinking. It seems a long time ago now since you and I sat in a bar late one night discussing all this. And
look what happened. We moved it forward. It was a good pint to have, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and one of the things was very much about housing, wasn't it? We were sitting, we were at BT Martlesham, not at that moment, but that's why we were there, and which was about all the sort of scientific, technical side of things. But we were discussing housing, as I recall, and that's the thing. And I suppose it's I'm just Tim. The reason for this is just simply, we're reviewing all the time our ability to deliver housing. There are always things going on that seem to be acting as blockages in the system, and I'm just concerned that we make sure that we coordinate things with the supply of housing effectively. That's all.
Okay. So Alan, as I say, we fit. So the land that we've purchased, we're in direct control. We're hoping to deliver 2 million square foot of office, so that's what we could deliver. So that's employment accommodation, and in the ballpark of 600 homes. So that's that's in our direct control, and then hopefully bringing with that what up to 3,000. But that's the longer term view. So in the short term, we're hoping that we've got direct control of at least over 600 homes. So whatever the market does, we're driving that forward.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and don't worry, Rob, even in this context, I'm happy to accept an analogue hand wave. Anyway, we did have Colin, but you've taken your hand down, Colin. You're okay? Great. Well, we've got Steve Jordan and then Mike Dawson, and maybe we'll draw a line after that. So, Steve. Oh, Colin is now back in. I'll come back to you, Colin.
Yeah, I hope the presentation that sort of emphasised. Sorry, what was that? Hopefully the presentation emphasised the excitement we have in Cheltenham on this scheme, and I know it is shared much more widely than that. But just the point I wanted to make really, and clearly housing is an important part of this, but for me, an absolute essential part from before day one has been that it benefits the local community who are here at the moment, and that they have the right skills, that particularly the young people around in Gloucestershire and Cheltenham now have the right skills to take advantage of this as it goes. That is an absolutely essential part of this, as well as any new homes that may come from it and people coming in to take jobs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all agree. Just to follow on from Diner, I think this is a huge opportunity for all the Gloucestershire as well. Mike, and then Colin.
Thanks, Chairman. Just one comment and a question, if I could, for Tim. The comment really is listening to all the presentation, which is great, and the comments that people have made. this is about the package, isn't it? Following on from Rob Bird's comment that digital businesses can locate almost anywhere they want. So why would they need to locate on a digital cyber park when they could be in Cornwall? So the overall issue is clearly that it's about the whole package around education, around networking, around housing, around transport, around digital connectivity, and everything that we've got to get the whole of that package put together so that Gloucestershire and the cyber offer in Golden Valley is a unique offer that draws people and businesses and money into this particular location. So that was my comment. The question from that then is how can, and you may not have an answer wholly for this today. So far, Cheltenham and its close partners have done a great job of promoting Golden Valley as a concept and promoting that particular concept as to why people should come here. The question is, how do we in the rest of Gloucestershire get behind you and do the same, given that you've effectively, the reports that you've just reported on the findings for Gloucestershire as a county being an amazing sort of position for digital. How do we as the rest of us get behind you to try and help build that commentary and the welcome nature of Gloucestershire really as a digital cyber focused county? Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, so shall I just quickly answer? So I think my view was after this conversation, I think was very much, well, what do we do next? Because this is pretty explosive. The information that we have here and how it affects what we do with the longer term growth, where we position ourselves, our position with the Western Gateway, but it also links into government because there is that interest there. So I think my thoughts were that subject to the group, I would work with other officers to try and bring a paper back to the next growth committees about, well, what's next? What does this mean for us? And what steps do we as Gloucestershire? It's not just about Cheltenham. It's bigger than that. How do we move this forward? Because we've put a team together here, and that's not exclusively for Cheltenham. That's for the greater good, and the work that Reid and Nick particularly are doing. It's far more. It reaches far further than just outside. So that I think would be sensible. The question is well, what's the next step, and what do we need to do? So if people would be comfortable with that, I'd probably suggest it's a good idea.
Terrific, thank you very much. And then finally, we'll go to Colin.
Thanks, Patrick. Mine's more a comment, and the last two speakers have sort of covered what I was going to say in one way or other. But what brings companies to an area are, the right location at the right price, the right resources available to them in terms of skills, etc. And I think we've got two of those three, and there's a real fear in my mind that we don't address the third, which is the skills element. Just providing something is I went through a vicious lesson myself when I was regenerating Luton. Our members were not going to, under any circumstances, allow us to replace high quality jobs in the car industry with sort of service sector jobs. And we actually went for a much slower burn fuse and brought in high spec companies, BA Systems, AstraZeneca, Gulfstream, Arthur Anderson, list goes on. And we did it. I thought, tick in the box. And then 7 years down the road, I suddenly realised all I was doing was sucking people in from the outside. I hadn't provided jobs for local people because I didn't have the right skill base to access those jobs I was creating. They'd had very good jobs, but with a low skill base before. And it's a real lesson to me that unless you get the schools and you get the colleges and you get the universities supporting, and to be honest, we're almost too late behind the curve. You're going to have the first buildings open in 21, 22, 23, 23, 24. We need to be doing it 4 or 5 years ago. We need to get very, very quickly the message out to the schools, to the colleges, to the university, who are just not putting the level of focus in at the moment on skills that we need to connect up. Otherwise, all we'll do, the business will either not not grow because the skill base isn't available, or they'll suck the skills in from outside, which actually makes Rob's point he made even worse, because then you need even more housing to meet the needs of the people coming in and not necessarily meet the needs of the local community that you're trying to serve at that time. So there's a real dichotomy, I think, that we've really got the bridge here. And it is, we need to get the skill side on board as quickly as possible and start teaching to the direction, so that skill base is there that's going to encourage those other companies to come in for the future, because they know the resources are there and not going to pay extortionate wages to draw people in from outside. I think that's a comment and observation. The other thing is, great presentation, but I missed a bit of it. And I think the reason I missed a bit of it is because I spent probably 10 minutes trying to work out, when I saw something you put up, whether I could actually drive from Cheltenham to Cambridge in 75 minutes, and I don't think it's possible. I think probably you struggle to do it in 2 hours. And just in a presentation like that, don't oversell, because what happens is you lose someone, you lose credibility, but equally as well, you actually lose person's concentration, because like me, the first thing I did is like a transport person. Could I do Cheltenham to Cambridge in 75 minutes? Well, the answer to that was no, because I googled it.
Just to add to that, Cambridge isn't meant to be one of them, but it's on the slide. So the 19 universities can be reached in 75 minutes. So, but you're right about the charts.
It's just, you don't need Cambridge there, because you got Oxford there, or put Oxford, then put Oxford Cambridge Arc or something like that, and you've got your 75-minute connection. But it's just, it's a tiny observation of the way my concentration went, because it's like, can you do that? And just anyway, just an observation. Cheers.
If I just pick up, so Colin, thank you for that. On the skills piece, I think you're absolutely fundamentally right. When you look at the DCMS reports every 2 years on skills in cyber, there's a massive gap. Now, the good news is that things like Cyber First program have been really successful. They've been targeting secondary skills and primary skills in Gloucestershire and beyond to really get kids interested in STEM subjects and in cyber, and coupled with that, providing apprenticeship programs has been really interesting. Just to give you an example, so my son has just sort of finished at Tommy's, actually, in Gloucester. Several of his friends have chosen to do apprenticeships, cyber apprenticeships, and go into the sector now rather than going to uni. Yeah, you've got Gloucester partnering with UE next door to GCHQ have now launched a cyber apprenticeship scheme. So the county is waking up to the need, and it's a start. I'm not suggesting it's sort of sufficient, but it's absolutely necessary. And one of the things that we need to do within the wider community is to get businesses to be willing to take apprentices and to bootstrap that. And we've got some evidence that that's happening. If you take Hub 8 where we are now, so there's a cyber security startup, came out of the NCSC accelerator, it's called Aquili. They decided to stay in Cheltenham rather than moving to Reading, and they've been recruiting locally. They've taken a cyber apprentice on as an employee. Yeah, that's just a little example, but you're absolutely right. We need to look across this, and it's not just cyber and tech skills. We are going to need people that can do accounting, marketing, legal, etc. So yes, STEM is at the heart of this, but actually we're going to have a broader set of skills as well. The other thing I would say is that in Cheltenham we've got the Cheltenham Science Centre, the Science Group on PE Way. So Dave Watson and the team, a very small outfit. They do science communication for local families in Hester's Way. Again, brilliant piece of work. Underfunded, and I'm not sure how they can scale, but things like that we want to be able to do in Cyber Central to really get to the families and the folks that would never consider going into the sector, get to them early so that they see they've got a future and there's hope for them, and that then helps us get the skills for the big companies like your IBMs and your BAE systems and so on that need cyber and technology. So yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you very much. We do need to draw a line in it there. Doina, you've still got your hand up though from your first question, I think. I appreciate that two, Dinah and Steve, are about to go, unfortunately. But anyway, we will move on. The next item is item number 5, and this is Gloucestershire Economic Growth Recovery Planning Update.
Chair.
Yep.
So it's Mike, Chair. If I could just make a comment, Tim made a suggestion then for an action for the committee. I just wonder if we could, if members are comfortable with that, just note that Tim has suggested that we officers meet to develop a paper together with Cheltenham colleagues for the next committee on where next and how other authorities can help and support Cheltenham in the wider Gloucestershire work. If Tim's happy with that, we can do that with maybe an extended version of the senior officer group in the meantime. And I just wondered if for the sake of the minutes, that was an action, Chair, that the committee was happy to approve. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mike. Thanks for that. Well, very quickly then, we've just heard about the action. Is everybody happy with that? Yes. Richard, Steve, all those. Yeah, thank you, Tony. So I think, and myself. So yeah, I think we can put that down as an action for next time. Thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. Okay, we'll move on now, and we'll see you next time, Steve. I think we've got an update on activities and proposals relating to the Gloucestershire Economic Recovery. And basically we'll have a little presentation from Colin, who's the Executive Director of Economy, Environment and Infrastructure at GCC. And then I think after that, Mike Dawson, Chair of the Senior Officer Group, will then pick up the presentation, I think with help from Lisa McCants. Is she there? Oh, yes, she is there.
Yes,
brilliant. So I'll hand over, Colin, over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. This is a sort of intermediate report, really. Our full report will be coming back to the next committee. Just to really let you know where we are from a county perspective in terms of the economic recovery planning in response to COVID and what we are doing about it, and how we're going about it. As probably the committee are aware, we had started sort of from a very strong sort of like coordination, collaboration, leadership role, and I felt at an early stage that was probably best led by the GGEC itself. So we sort of passed our early reports over to GGEC to then develop out, which Lisa's been doing, from that coordination and collaboration type principle of GGEC. So then we had to reflect on what reflect really what the county's role was going forward. As in doing that, we went out to all the districts. Lisa did some work for us. All the districts were interviewed, the LEP were interviewed, partners and the transition board at GCC all interviewed to gain the sort of thinking and a general feel about what the county's role is and how we can best support people in moving forward. That really really sort of crystallised really what the county's role is, which in the report is really sort of threefold. It's sort of, you know, our core business, delivering key county-wide and sub-regional priorities across growth and infrastructure, things like focus on areas where we have direct responsibility, such as transport schemes, you know, J10, J9, all those things enable major growth to take place. You know, without J10, you wouldn't get Cyber Park, for example. Without J9, you would not get Ashchurch Garden Village, etc. So it's about that enabling aspect from the transport perspective, about connectivity to the rural connectivity, both digital and obviously transport, about skills, adult education and placemaking, supporting the districts with their own locality placemaking, creating the conditions for recovery for districts to do what they need to do, delivering against the clean and green agenda, focusing on coordinating activity at county-wide level, so it's things like working closely with partners to understand growth ambitions and leading those plans, gathering information, disseminating that information so people can make considered decisions going forward, and delivering against our core and statutory functions. And then obviously bringing additional capacity and weight through leadership, lobbying government for needed investment, like J9, J10 funding, and other areas, particularly around, so for example, if we want to focus on STEM and drive that STEM agenda, trying to lobby for the funding and the powers as well, try and bring the powers together to enable us to give stronger assistance on that skills agenda. And then obviously ensuring a strong voice across the economic landscape. So promoting key sectors through, for example, coordinated campaigns. Like I've mentioned before, like raising the platform for a sector through promotion and other initiatives, that then that sector is a much higher level, that sector can all springboard off from their own particular areas of work, or geographical sector come to that. So that really leads us to what our focus is in terms of the road to recovery. And I think that's really threefold: hardwiring infrastructure with the economy. So that's digital, physical delivery, really just lead on from what I've just said. Physical delivery, strategic leadership around digital inclusion and exploitation, education and training, again, that big one about training, skills, etc. And link obviously into the LEP there with that LEP priority with the skills. New ways of working, reviewing opportunities presented with our own asset base and exploring the 15-minute lifestyle concept and things like that. Connected people and places, obviously, as I mentioned, transport, delivering sustainable transport, planning, developing new pipeline investment and mobility of labour. And then really what we call the thriving communities, which is skills, ensuring reskilling and upskilling is central to the recovery. You've got the skills element, yeah, you can see it's skills and skills. And then employment, developing a model of business engagement which reaches all corners of the county. So that's where we're going. We hope to have a report back with that more rounded and an action plan for those areas to come forward in November. So that just hopefully gives you a taste and a flavour of where we've got to and where we're going to over the next month or so, and sort of what we hope the outturns will be.
Thank you, Colin. Before we go to Mike then, does anybody have any questions or comments on the report?
Patrick, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
We think we've got a little bit of problem with YouTube sticking. Can I just check with Nigel that we're still able to continue with the meeting as a public meeting? Nigel, are you able to come in and confirm we're okay with YouTube?
There doesn't seem to be any problem with YouTube at my end. I can see it streaming quite nicely.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. That's fine. We had a message to say it was sticking slightly from somebody external to the meeting. We can continue. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. So yes, Tim, got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, thanks, Colin. And I suppose this relates to the paper which comes after this as well. So maybe we can conflate both about the point I make. Really, just linking into the the presentation that we've made and the economic analysis that came out of that, and some of the powerful messages. So, a part of me is thinking, do we want to make a little bit more of that in terms of about our ambition, about turning recovery into, turning some of this into recovery around the strength of the cyber sector. And I know you mentioned digital in there, but I feel when I link that paper and the next paper we're going to discuss about where that ambition is and where we want to position ourselves slightly. Because I'd take everyone back to the spending review, and I would urge people to look at it. You connect the dots. There's a massive role for us, and there is big ambition from the government there, and it's on our goal. It's here. It's here for us to take advantage. So. All I would ask that in terms of moving this forward, we kind of build something around that to exploit that ambition.
Can I come back on that?
Yeah, go on.
Absolutely, Tim. Completely agree. We saw as part of this recovery, obviously, I've been party to and been involved with the Western Gateway, and from a Gloucestershire perspective, obviously been pushing very, very hard for our profiles to be put to the front in terms of the digital accelerator work that you see and the bid that's going into the CSR. This just gone in the last couple of days from Western Gateway, which obviously would help us. And along with that element of like I said earlier about the digital skills, it was said earlier it's digital skills, it's actually that whole STEM business, because we shouldn't actually forget either that still take away the public sector, still the biggest employer in Gloucestershire is advanced manufacturing and engineering. It's still 15% of the employment base. So when you look at it in those respects, STEM has got a very, obviously the spin-off from STEM into the cyber. So I'm not going to let go of our more traditional areas that are also strong, because I think that's really going to help our recovery in the short to medium term. And I think, and then digital working alongside that, and then I think that may well become eventually the bigger player. But I think it's, I think we need to ride several horses, and that's not become a one-trick pony at the moment. And I think it's about driving that STEM skill base that enables people to access all of those right across. But I agree with you entirely that that whole digital aspect and the skilling up is all is a serious part of the recovery from COVID, but also a long-term strategy for the future for the county.
Okay, thank you, Colin. John, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just, from the previous meeting and today's discussion, we're trying to sort of make sure that we all understand who's playing what role, so that we're not duplicating and we're supporting each other in various aspects of the recovery. So I'm trying to sort of mentally get my head around who are the lead organisations in various different aspects of recovery. And there was a couple of references in this document, which is primarily about the county council's leadership role, where I was a bit surprised, because I'd been thinking mentally that the LEP was in the lead for some of these things. So one of the phrases in this document was about promoting the sort of sectoral approach, for instance, the visitor economy. Now, I had thought that the LEP's recovery plan was basically saying that, effectively in my mental map, the LEP are leading the sectoral recovery, and the districts are leading the sort of locality recovery, and the county are sort of sitting there with the sort of infrastructure and that sort of thing. So I was surprised to see the county taking a sort of what looked like a leadership role in the sectoral recovery aspect. And then further down, it also talked about developing the business the business engagement. And again, I'd have seen the LEP as being the lead organisation, for want of a better word, leading the business engagement. So I'm not sure whether this paper is just talking about the county council playing a supporting role in those aspects, or if I'm a bit confused about who's playing the leadership role in those aspects. Thanks.
Colin, do you want to come in?
No, there's an element of truth in it. I think the LEP and the county work very closely together. I mean, basically there was a meeting, I can't remember, it was yesterday or the day before, which was about the tourism side, which effectively the council were directly involved with Dev chairing, and I think I would regard it for the most part of working together to achieve that. I don't think sometimes it's not an immediate, direct, obvious leadership role. It's about us LEP and I alluded here several times about working with the LEP to achieve these objectives. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's at times both in terms of getting to where we need to get to. That's where we'll be coming from. I think from the beginning of this. So unless Deb disagrees entirely, but I mean that's where we saw it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to comment?
Yeah, just to chip in. I'm along the lines with John in terms of trying to keep it as clear as possible. But at the same time, from Colin's point of view, we are talking regularly. So I think we can all bring strengths to this. And one of the 3 C's was collaboration. So I think you kind of need a lead in some shape or form, but the collaboration is the most important part. If all the parties are sat around the table when we're having this discussion, as we did on Monday with the visitor economy, it was great. We had the county, all the districts there, all the DMOs there, and it was a really constructive conversation. So I think, God, I hate saying I agree with you both, but I see what you're both saying, and I think I would be thinking, if we're trying to keep the message simple for all of us to understand, and then the business community and wider audience, the way you described it, John, is pretty good, actually. to keep it that way.
Okay, thank you, Dev. And you're all absolutely right. It is collaboration is a key component in all of this. Let's move on then to Mike. Do you want to give us your half of the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Well, actually, Lisa's going to do most of this. Just got a couple of points I'd like to make before that. That discussion was quite interesting in terms of the collaboration. I think the county do have a specific role because they do have a broad county-wide view, which is very helpful when it comes to collaboration, in that the county support can identify areas where we may need to work together a little bit better. The other point just to make, Chair, was that the report that you have before you, which Lisa's going to present in a moment, Philippa's on the meeting, but we did talk last time about this committee's previous piece of work around removing barriers to development. And we spoke last time that we would look to review and revitalise that work, which, although it's not necessarily part specifically of the recovery plan, will have a knock-on effect to it by looking to smooth the way for development, and growth is very much part of the recovery issues. So I just mentioned that really because Philippa is now leading on behalf of the senior officer group that piece of work. Indeed, it's an interesting piece of work in itself, and just to let you know, we've had a meeting, Philippa and I, with representatives from Somerset councils who want to repeat that piece of work in Somerset, and because they see it as quite important. So once again, Gloucestershire, I think, and this committee leading the way in a piece of work to support the speed of development and growth. So Philippa may wish to comment on that, but effectively that's just to let the committee know that that piece of work will be moving forward, and I've no doubt Philippa and her colleagues will bring reports back in future on that particular piece of work, Chair. In terms of the report that you've got before you, this report was produced following a really interesting senior officer group meeting where we had some fairly frank exchange of views. Now, normally when you say that, you tend to sort of almost be a bit of a euphemism for bad-tempered exchange of views. It wasn't that at all. It was candid views, but well-held views, which helped us put this report together. A couple of points that's probably worth making. Some of them has been touched upon. One I've already mentioned, and that was the county's collaborative and coordination role. The other one, though, was the recognition of the importance of the local placemaking recovery plans, and the fact that we didn't want to overburden partner organisations, particularly the districts, or tread on toes in looking to do something on a county basis which would detract from that work. So one of the principles we agreed was to give space, make sure we gave space to the district council's recovery plans, and indeed to other recovery plans like the LEP, so that they can move forward. And therefore that meant that we probably limited at this stage the areas of focus for collaboration in the county to a smaller number of areas to work together on, because the more that we had, the more we felt that we'd potentially be withdrawing resources from local place-based planning, and that wouldn't be helpful, but also to try and achieve best bang for our buck in terms of where we focused our resources. So that's why the background to the report and why it does tend to focus on some specifics. Lisa will take us through that. I do say that, though, that I did pick up on Tim's comment earlier on around the need to reflect our ambition as a county in our recovery plans, and I think that's something we might usefully take away and see if there is anything that we can specifically build into the plans. And then the final comment from me is, as with all our recovery plans at the minute, we're still not sure where we're going with this pandemic. We're still not sure just how the economy of the county is going to be effective. So all these plans are flexible, and we can, of course, and may well wish to amend the plans as we go forward. But so this is very much a statement for where we are now, and it came from a very frank and very useful discussion at the senior officer group a few weeks ago. So with that, Chairman, if I can hand over to Lisa to present the detailed report. Thank you.
Terrific. Yes, Lisa.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Chair. So as mentioned at the late July Joint Committee meeting, senior officer groups officers presented their COVID recovery plans, and the Joint Committee tasked the group with identifying specific areas for collaboration and specific actions that might support that collaboration going forward. And in the last 6 weeks or so, Senior Officer Group have been discussing the principles of collaboration, as Mike mentioned, the areas of core priorities, and some of the collaborative actions which may need to be taken forward. So at 2.1 in the report, some of those principles have been outlined. And broadly, these represent that each organisation involved in the recovery planning needs to play to its own strength, while recognising where the statutory responsibility lies for a lot of this activity. The issues really need to be dealt with at the right geography. So some of the locality challenges picked up by the districts, for example, and some of the county-wide issues generally picked up or supported or led on by the county council, while also giving some space to make sure that those local recovery plans can be delivered. Also an identification that there needed to be an appreciation for some of the priorities featuring at a county-wide level, so there needing to be a steer from, as you've just discussed, either the county council in conjunction with the local enterprise partnership, or depending on what the topic is, the county itself or the LEP individually. Two of the other areas, really the need for constant and productive dialogue, so making sure that the conversations can continue to happen and any challenges and barriers can be dealt with in the moment. And then finally appreciating that there is finite capacity across all the organisations, so this needs to be directed where the greatest impact can be made. So from the last Joint Committee meeting, there were broadly 7 areas that transpired in relation to where collaboration could take place. And that was based on the analysis of all of those recovery plans that were presented. And these are all areas that are intended to promote growth and business resilience. So very much going back to John's point earlier. And these include, and so there's a long list at 2.2. So skills and employment, a real key issue across the whole county, digital, and this relates to access to technology, as well as access to connectivity in an attempt to close some of that divide between communities. Some sector-specific activities, so cyber has been particularly identified, as well as tourism and the visitor economy. And I suspect going forward, other areas such as advanced manufacturing, which we know is very key to Cheltenham, to Tewkesbury, for example, will need some attention. High street activity, planning and barriers to development, as has just been mentioned in relation to the work that Philip is doing. New ways of working, so really that's identifying how the workforce is going to operate in the future and how new markets can be developed. And then Tim's point earlier about funding and funding opportunities, so making sure that the county is aware of the funding opportunities that are available to them and making sure they can be either drawn down or bid for through competitive processes to make sure that more can be delivered locally. And then sitting across all of those 7 themes are really some cross-cutting areas such as joint lobbying, making sure that low carbon economy and low carbon activity is central to all of this, and using data to really identify where some of those challenges might be, For example, the emerging opportunity gap for the 16 to 24-year-olds and the maybe lesser job opportunities that might be presented to them, and the alternatives around different education routes, apprenticeships and getting into employment. So notwithstanding that's quite a long list of areas to focus on, and the resource that's required to go into that, the group decided to look at a couple of those that might feature as higher priorities within the action plan in the short to medium term. And those three areas are skills, the visitor economy, and routes to lobbying. So just briefly going through those then, in relation to skills, historically there's some county-wide challenges of skills deprivation, and an additional COVID challenge in relation to the potential for increased unemployment, as we've seen has happened or started to happen, and the need and ability for residents to reskill or upskill and move into new roles and new employment. And there's a number of key sectors that have been identified through the work that the LEP has done in relation to some of those priorities. So again, going back to cyber and digital, construction and particularly modern method of construction, as well as engineering, and understanding what green collar jobs could be brought forward in terms of some of that low carbon sector. And some of the fusion skills that seem to be a challenge with a lot of your employers at the moment, which basically is a combination of communication, thinking, organisation and creative skills, and trying to bring some of those forward. And in the document at 2.4, there's the start point of a set of actions that have been identified through the work of the senior officer group. So looking to identify what those weaknesses might be, and making sure that there's strong engagement with HE and FE, really to develop some projects and innovative solutions around what might happen next. Trying to see how a lot of this can support job seekers, and appreciating what emerging skills might be required. And then going on to gather increasing intelligence. As Mike said, we still don't really know the full extent of what's going to happen or what has happened. So it's making sure that the organisations involved can be agile and use that locality-based intelligence to bring forward new schemes and initiatives. In relation to the visitor economy, another sector I think that's really key to the county as a whole, and appreciating the earlier discussion around where that lead sits. I think we've noticed, and some of the evidence has shown us, that there's been high volumes of domestic tourists over the summer and coming into the early autumn. Traditionally, domestic tourists spend less, so you've got higher volumes of people, but not necessarily putting as much into the local economy. So it's seeing what else can be done around that space. And also appreciating, as also mentioned, there's a number of partners operating in this space, so that strength of coordination and activity, identifying any new and emerging issues, as well as having some kind of place promotion and identity to promote the area as a whole. And again, there's a table in the document that talks about the short, medium and long-term opportunities, with some of the longer-term opportunities really featuring around the strategic nature of tourism and the visitor economy, and seeing how relationships can develop with the likes of Visit Britain, and making sure that the Western Gateway and the Great West Way initiatives can feature in that. And then finally, lobbying as one of the cross-cutting themes was really identified as an area of focus. So really trying to build on the power of the collective organisations coming together. And probably worth mentioning, this isn't just about funding, but also about freedoms and flexibilities. So what is it that you want to lobby government for, and government departments in that regard? And some of the areas that were identified by Senior Officer Group include apprenticeships. So obviously, council and other organisations pay into the apprenticeship levy. At the moment, there are still some unspent funds. How can lobbying be taken forward to see if it's possible to use that fund in a different way or in a more creative way to bring forward more apprenticeships, perhaps through your cyber or your digital priorities, and also work to identify absent landlords, which may stymie development across high streets over the next short to medium term. So I think finally to note or to mention that Senior Officer Group obviously will continue to work on this agenda, continue to progress some of those actions as far as possible, and then take any feedback from yourselves today and build that into what needs to be delivered for the future and brought back to your November committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and yourself, Mike. Okay, do we have any questions or comments? Tim with the analog handshake.
I don't seem to have the functionality for doing that. I've been trying to find it, but anyway, I'll ask my question. So really, it's building on from the point before, Lisa. So thank you very much for that. And did look through the report, and I think this is obviously an iterative process, and we're trying to build up the report. So very much appreciate that. But I do think. Taking us back to some of the things that boxing with some of the things that we're good at, and also looking at the government's policies and what's strong. And so I'll take us back to the spending review, and I would strongly think we look at that. We look at what the narrative has been from governments, particularly on this element about lobbying. And there is a lot about, retaining talent, developing talents, becoming a scientific powerhouse again, being a global leader in things. And then we could, because our way into lobbying government, and Dev will maybe help out with this, is about ticking some of those right boxes, because that will then open a conversation with some of the other things we might want to influence. So I think, maybe we need to build that up a little bit, and happy to help with that. And I suppose the other thing is just going back to the ambition thing about, really stepping out about some things that we could do to really drive things forward. And maybe we need to build that on a little bit. But, I've spoken enough about it. But as long as we're able to pick up on building into that, and that people are generally comfortable with it, I do think we're potentially missing a trick, because, there is something which is, looks quite interesting, ticks all of the boxes about science, technology, high value growth. But there's that learning, and the point that Colin's been making. Let's not forget about the existing communities and the existing jobs. I think we can mix all of that together and make it a bit more punchy as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Lisa, do you want to come back on that?
Just to say, I think it's a really interesting point. It's easy to look at some of the high growth and more interesting projects in this regard. But as you say, there are a number of individuals and residents within communities that might be so far from that perspective of getting a job in a digital environment. So it's making sure that some of those levels of deprivation can be raised to the point that everybody has that kind of equal or equality of opportunity. But also making sure that growth can happen at the other end, so that we almost nudge everyone along that continuum and that part of the process.
Thank you very much. Philippa.
Thanks. Just a couple of queries. On page 21, when you look at the things that we initially identified, just something that's coming out of a lot of discussions we're having either with communities or businesses about this whole idea about new ways of working, but wider new ways of living. And I think there is a conversation to be had of saying, do we understand what the future is going to be like in terms of how we work, how we live, how we socialise, all those sorts of things, and how that might influence how you do development growth in the future. So that's a general theme that's coming out. Another one under the skills bit is that whether you need to mention about DWP, because they are becoming more of a critical partner in terms of developing the hubs for young people for training and skills on that side. So again, it might just be worth flagging that. And then under the sections where you talk about some of the short-term next steps it talks about weaknesses, but I think there is also a bit about capturing, and it does pick out some of the conversation before about strengths, because we need to make sure we're really clear where the strengths that we're going to be built on. So look at what our assets are and what we can each bring to that. So I think that is all part of resilience as well, but certainly a strengths-based approach is the work we're doing a lot with local communities and not a deficit model. So I think it really would be important to capture those strengths and assets as part of this work.
Thank you, Philippa. Yes, what is the new normal? Lisa, do you want to come back?
Just to say, all really valid points. I'm not sure in terms of new ways of working that it's really clear as yet what is going to happen. I know a number of, the workforce have gone back, but it's not at the levels that I think were predicted. And obviously some concerns over second spikes and reduced movement. So I think that's very much a watching brief to see what is possible. But I think, as you mentioned, how can this be considered in any kind of future planning policy or routes in terms of the large developments that are happening, and also making sure that the digital piece can come up behind that to make sure that everybody's got access and accessibility towards broadband.
Thank you, Lisa. I've got no more hands up. Anybody waving?
I think Steve Mawson would like to come in, please.
Yeah, Steve.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that there's kind of two consistent pieces of work going on here. So this is the economic recovery piece that we're doing, and we're also working in partnership across the whole county on a kind of operational level recovery piece, the work that we're doing on the LRF. And that's where the DWP piece that Philip has been referring to is coming in. So we've got the DWP coming to the recovery board next week to present what they want to do on the youth hubs, and particularly trying to bring the operational activity together. And what we're tending to see is that that debate around what the future holds, we're certainly in that kind of middle ground at the moment. So the work that the County Council have been doing is we kind of put it into three phases. First phase is the operational activity here and now, what we've been referring to as the kind of 10% zone, where people have been in that zone of 10%. We are now pushing on to the second phase, which is the maybe up to 25%. And on average, that's what most buildings can cope with in a kind of COVID secure environment, or most current buildings can cope with that. So certainly for us, the County Council, that's about up to 25%, looking at all those productivity gains and health and well-being issues that we can work with our workforce. And we think we can cope with that on a kind of semi-flexible basis. And then the third bit is the future planning for the what next. And as colleagues have already said, that's a little bit harder to predict. And I would expect it's above 25%, but we're not putting a percentage range on it. We need to work through all those productivity issues with colleagues and health and well-being issues, and say which different services across the stream need a greater office presence or a greater presence in the buildings, and what bits don't, and where do we need to look at the channel migration to work with our service areas. And I know that district colleagues are clearly working on this as well, and trying to take advantage of those channel migration areas while still maintaining that we need some regular contact with our customers on an ongoing basis. So that third piece is a little bit harder to plan, and I'm happy to come back with a piece once we know a bit more. But as colleagues have said, it's a movable feast at the moment. So we've been concentrating on those first two phases at the current time.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I've got Robert, Rob Bird, and then Dev. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. This section, I think, am I right in saying that this came out of a meeting then of senior officers after the last committee meeting? Is that correct? What we're reading here, this paper, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so and the reason I'm just checking on that is, so at the last meeting we talked about various things that we thought would be helpful to recover the local economy, the economy of Gloucestershire. And there were three elements: communication, collaboration, and creating confidence. This paper talks a lot about collaboration. What I'm wondering about is the bit about creating confidence. And in particular, Lisa has just talked about the return to work not happening as we might have expected. And this is fundamental to the economic recovery. The economy generally is not recovering as it needs to, and as we would hope it to for everybody's benefit. There is a considerable reluctance to return to work in many ways. And, I can't say why or how that is, except that it's almost as if this meeting's been going on in a parallel universe. We've talked, from the presentations on Cyber Central, etc. We've talked about all the wonderful things that are going to happen, but in the real world, just outside my window, there's an awful lot of things that are not happening, because there's this continual message that people shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that, and they can't do this and they can't do that, and so we have two conflicting messages going on in the world, and the whole thing about confidence that is lacking at the moment is so important. And so I go back to the point: creating confidence. We're as authorities, we're used to collaborating. We know all the networks and all that sort of stuff, but we need to do some stuff about how we create confidence. I'm not providing any ideas here. I'm just saying it's something we need to think about. We talked about in the collaboration bit about the visitor economy. Well, as a recent visitor to other parts of the United Kingdom, I can say quite categorically that the lack of confidence, the fear factor that's going on in the world out there, all these petty regulations which are telling people that they can't do this and they can't do that. And what's really fascinating to me is when I've visited places is, businesses are operating to a certain set of rules. They're laid down. Their interpretations and the way they do things are remarkably different, quite widely. And that drives their success as businesses or not. And I started out this rather lengthy rant by saying this work has come out of that meeting, but are we addressing the confidence bit in this? We've talked a lot about collaboration, we've talked a bit about communication, but are we addressing the creating confidence? Because to me, that is fundamentally key. If we're to dig ourselves out of this economic hole that we are in, and all the things that the wonderful ideas that we've talked about earlier on won't happen unless we can get back to working again. Lisa, you mentioned about the lack of return to the office. Well, and yet earlier on we were talking about cyber and office space for people to meet and mix. Well, at the moment they're not going to do that, are they? I suppose it's a plea to, can we consider, please, the what little we can do as authorities in this area to build confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I think you made a very important point. And in my view, in some respects, and I was going to bring this up, this is where the communication comes in. I think we need to make sure our communication is right up there, so we're actually demonstrating what we are doing and what we're putting in place to try and instill that confidence. But yeah, it's a tricky, enigmatic thing, confidence, isn't it?
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on that point you've made? Because clearly, I take the point about communication and how important it is, but at the moment, it's not. I'm not so sure. We've done some stuff, but clearly, the overall economy is not confident and is not. We're not succeeding in that endeavour at the moment.
Lisa or Mike, do you want to come in on that?
Thank you very much. I think we take the point in terms of confidence. It's something we can look at. We've certainly considered it in terms of the visitor economy strand in the report, and the need for confidence in that area. In general terms, though, Chair, one of the issues is, firstly, most people are following government guidance at the moment, which is, I agree, quite complicated and does change. But the one thing that you tend to find at the minute is there's quite a conflict and a divergence between the government guidance which is given that businesses and others have to follow, and indeed what the government say sometimes publicly in terms of how we should all return to work. So the message is quite difficult to manage. From the group that when we spoke in the senior officer group, there is actually quite a lot of work around building confidence that can happen at local level through the district plans in the work that we are promoting in terms of our own areas. And there's quite a lot of work in those district plans about that's been identified about doing just that. So in terms of the joint committee, we we were one of the principles I said earlier was not to look to try and repeat the work that might be being done locally within our towns and town centres and within our businesses. But I think if the committee feels that it is an area we could look to do more on, well, as I say, when we take this away, we'll take the message and see where we are. But what can be done, but there is a bit of an issue with the government guidance. Is quite definite in many areas in terms of businesses, and trying to sort of walk that line between what the guidance and requirements are, which are coming out of government, and trying to build confidence. At the minute, it doesn't feel quite such an easy task. I don't know whether Lisa wants to pick up on that, but it is a point we can take away. And we did, for the first time, really, introduce the concept of the committee through you, Chair, as you mentioned right at the top of the meeting, of issuing a press release about what we were trying to do here. And I think we could usefully continue with that process as we go forward. Lisa, I don't know whether you want to add to that.
No, nothing to add, other than I wonder if there's more conversations to be had with the private sector in terms of how is it that they see building confidence to get more people back into either their own workplace or into high streets to spend their disposable income. But I don't know if that's something that's already happening through the business groups that the Local Enterprise Partnership manage.
Okay. Tony, do you want to come in specifically on this point? I've seen you in the chat. So.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. I do think it would do us all some good not to try and live too much in dreamland. I've had conversations in the last 2 days with representatives at Arup, which is one of the UK's leading global engineers, and McKinsey, and indeed with colleagues at PwC. PwC has 22,000 employees in the UK. There are not currently plans for them to, in inverted commas, stop working, but that's a big difference between going back to work and carrying on working digitally. We just need to be very, very clear about what we mean. The reality is, if you're in a professional services environment, that will involve a huge number of the workers that currently exist in city centres. So it will directly affect Gloucester and Cheltenham, and to a lesser extent, Cirencester. A lot of those services workers do not need to go back to work. They've been working throughout, they're not on furlough, and they have continued their jobs at home. Many of them do not see a reason to go back to work because there is no point in adding a further hour and a half to 2 hours a day to their commute when they're working very productively at home. So I think whatever plans we're building around resurrecting our city centres and town centres needs to be grounded in a new reality that we are not going to have the number of commercial workers in our towns and city centres that we used to have. I'd just say stop dreaming and start living in the new digital world. This is exactly why I've worked so hard with Philippa and our officers at Cotswold District Council to focus on how we make all of our businesses more digitally resilient, and we enable our residents to be more digitally savvy. They've got to do a lot more online. They will do anyway, and we have to start working a lot harder and thinking about why we do travel and how we would benefit by not wasting all that fuel and burning it. So I really do think we've got to be a bit more radical about where we're going with this. If we go into national lockdown again in 2 weeks' time, we might as well start again. And I can see that as highly likely.
Thank you, Tony. Lisa or Mike, do you want to come back? I think we're discussing what the new normal will look like as much as anything.
I think that is the case, and I recognise Councillor Dale's comments. I think the other issue, though, of course, is the issue of people using businesses and visiting and that side of the economy that we could think about. I think at this point, Chair, we're just taking comments from everybody, and we'll see how that pans out in terms of the further development. As I said, this is a planning process that's going to have to change and evolve to meet the changing situation that we're all going to find ourselves in future. But I think the confidence bit is something you said at last meeting, and we'll take the comments away from this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Richard Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I think a great deal of common sense has been spoken by everybody here on the subject of confidence. There is an awfully difficult line to find between giving enough confidence to individuals to go out into the high streets and spend their money. Who are we talking about in terms of confidence? Are we talking about businesses and their confidence? They're only going to get more confidence if more people go out there and spend more money. And we run the risk, if people go out there and spend more money, that we encourage the very lockdown coming again that we all fear. Are we talking about businesses bringing back employees into the city centres? If they do, that will help those businesses in the city centre that rely on that footfall. But again, are we not then creating the very situation where we are going to encourage the spread of the virus and then end up in a further lockdown? So I actually see, for me, a huge amount of benefit in being able to do a lot of my work sitting at home, using a computer like this. It doesn't mean I've got a lack of confidence. I don't need to go out. I can do my work from home, and an awful lot of people can do their work from home and do so. So everybody, in talking about confidence, we just got to recognise, we don't get overconfident by trying to bring back people into the city centres, when that would just cause a problem in locking us all down again.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah. Dev and then Steve. Do you want to come in as well, Steve, after that?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, some good points, actually. And I originally put my hand up to reply to something Philippa had raised in terms of flexible working. And that was something we raised in our draft local industrial strategy 18 months ago, prior to, in the good old days before COVID, and trying to encourage people not to, if you don't have to drive, can you work from home? Have we got the digital tech to do that? And blended working is something, it was one of our interventions in our recovery plan, encouraging people, if you don't have to go into an office all the time, why not see if you can do a mixture, a couple of days in the office, a couple of days at home, and a day in a growth hub. And something we're trying to get information from our businesses at the moment through our sector groups is, what are their plans for the future in terms of the split of their staff? How many are they going to get back into the office once, again, social distancing isn't an issue? And a lot of businesses are playing it close to their chest at the moment. And I think because we've got the sort of the furlough end at the end of October, there are undoubtedly going to be a lot of redundancies coming along with that. But businesses aren't willing to sort of share just yet what our plans are, because, they don't want to be saying just yet until the 11th hour. And is there going to be a furlough extension? Probably not across the base. So I think it was raised, somebody mentioned, it's still, we're right in the middle. I heard somebody say we're in the eye of the storm at the moment. We don't know where this is going. But I think whatever happens, the sort of the push for flexible working and an improvement of work-life balance has got to be a positive thing.
Thank you, Dev. Yeah, Steve, do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, and I think this also goes back to the dual role that public authorities have in terms of that protecting the public and the health protection role that we carry out, as well as that economic drive for improvement. So the county council also carries the role of closing businesses if they aren't. If we've got some concern, we also have environmental health officers in district councils that are carrying out inspections. So there's a kind of dual role there to make sure that we're protecting people safely, whilst, as Councillor Bird says, also encouraging that go out and do things safely in your environment. And Gloucestershire hasn't seen the spike larger numbers that other places have, but we have seen an increase. So I think, as Dev points out, and I know Sarah Scott, the public director of public health, presented at the LEP board yesterday, to make those points. We need to get the communication out to business. If you do things safely, you can do things. and it's not about not doing anything. It is about doing things safely. And I think there is a line for us here to think about as senior officers in how we do that dual activity in terms of communications.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Rob, you've just popped your hand up again.
Thank you, Chair. And it was just really to follow up on what Steve has just said. I think that very point. If we can do more and do it safely, and that's the fundamental point about creating confidence. And at the moment, we're not doing enough safely. Just a word of warning to all those people who think that it's a wonderful world now that they're sitting at home playing on their computers. Well, they might suddenly find that other people are doing that work sitting at home in another part of the globe. So it's not, it's all very well for us to say, to be complacent about about home working, but that could lead to a complete devastation of professional services in this country. And so it's surely in all our interests to ensure that actually we sustain the viability of professional service working in this nation, and don't suddenly find that due to this kind of complacent attitude, we've just outsourced all our livelihoods. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Yeah, I mean, I think I've got to be honest. I think, as Dev says, there has to be a hybrid version of this. Some people will not want to work from home. Some people can't work from home. And also, I think the human interactivity of working and working with colleagues is vitally important, if nothing else, from a mental health point of view. So I think a hybrid model has to be or must be on the cards in some sort. Anyway, should we draw a line under this section at the moment? We're asked as a committee to allow the next steps, which is for the senior officer group to continue the progress and the actions as set out in the report, but also take on board all the comments that have been said in terms of the report. So are we all happy with that as an approach going forward? Yeah, nods and winks. Terrific, excellent. Okay, on that basis then, thank you very much, Mike, Lisa and Colin. And we look forward to a further update in November. Anyway, we'll now move on to item number 6, which is pages 25 to 34. And this is the G1st LEP update from Dev. We have had the reports. I'm not sure you're not going to read it or go take us all through. Thanks, Dev. But just if you could highlight all the matters or key points of interest, that would be great. Over to you, Dev.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely conscious of time. My report focused on 3 specific areas of LEP activity over the last couple of months or so. There's an update on growth deal projects. There's an update on the Getting Building Fund, and then on the Inward Investment Project. The first one, the growth deal projects, in addition to what was in the report, in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of positive developments. Gloucester Railway Station has received, will be receiving another £1.7 million from DfT for the refurbishment of that, which is in addition to the LEP's £4.3 million. So that's excellent news. And the money, again, is being used for more electric vehicle charging, more cycle spaces, solar paneling, and a very cool looking canopy as well to the front of it. So that will really nicely complement the transport hub as your first view when you arrive in Gloucester. Secondly, also positive, our growth hubs have been given not a massive pot of money, just under £500,000 to give out as business grants to SMEs. It's roughly split 50-50. Some is for the tourism sector, and then some is for any SME in any sector. The grants will be up to £3,000 and can be spent on equipment or consultancy services. The negative is the 450 odd K will pay for about 150 grants, and we've done very little promotion on this already, but we've had over 1,000 businesses have registered their interest. So it just goes to show that where there are grants available, people, go towards them very, very quickly. But it is positive, and we've already gone back to government department MHCLG to say, look, this is going to be massively oversubscribed. They want to know which sectors will be getting it in particular, and final numbers on the demand. So I'll keep you posted on that. Then there's the Getting Building Fund. That was the second element I updated, and I put quite a lot of detail in the report on the timescale, the process, and the governance for that, because it was an incredibly tight turnaround when the money was announced. The county got 11.3 million, which is excellent news, and that will fund 5 quite exciting projects across the county. As Tim mentioned earlier, 4 out of 5 are in the cyber/digital sectors, and all 5 now have been signed off by the LEP board. The last one was Hartbury University, their digital farm, and that got signed off yesterday. And the Secretary of State for MHCLG, Robert Jenrick, he visited the county last week, went to the Forest of Dean, excuse me, and visited KW Bell, where we're giving them just under £2 million for a construction accelerator site. So that's great for him to visit the county. That got some good publicity. Then the third one is the Inward Investment Project, and that's an area due to COVID has gone really, really quiet. And in light of that, we thought, well, we've got a team of 4. We don't want them twiddling their thumbs. So we've refocused them on COVID response and recovery planning. And we asked the managing authority for an extension to that project, and they granted that. So that's good news. That project, hopefully when things start picking up again and we can start revisiting the likes of having a presence at MIPIM, Farnborough Air Show, and trips to South Korea, that kind of thing, we'll have a little bit more time to do that. And the money all stays the same. The outputs stay the same. We've just got an extra 12 months worth of activity that we can help the county. So that's good news. And then the last couple of things, I think most of you are aware that David and I go on a bit of a road trip twice a year, visiting all the local authorities, having one-to-ones with your senior teams. That has kicked off again, the next round. We met the team from Stroud last week, had a very positive meeting. And we've got meetings in the diary with all the others over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we look forward to those. We find them very useful. I wouldn't use the phrase frank conversations. They're just very open and honest conversations. What are priorities from each party's point of view, how we can help each other, that kind of thing. So look forward to seeing you at those. And the very last thing, you'll remember that our chair, Diane Savoury, was due to step down at the end of July this year. But due to COVID, we thought, to have that stability during this period would make sense, and also to try and recruit, interview any potential new candidate during the COVID situation is quite tricky. So we asked Bays if they would let us extend that, which they agreed to. So we got an extension through to March 2021, but we won't be asking for another extension. They've kind of said you're not going to get another extension. So again, it's asking you now to start thinking if there are individuals around the county on your patches that you think would be a good chair, the next chair of the LEP. Diane has done an excellent job for 9 years, but as I said, she can't continue it any longer. So if you do have any ideas, we'll be starting a recruitment campaign probably towards the end of October. But if you've got any candidates you think would be good ones for us, please ping me an email. Simple as that. So that was it, Chair. That's all I wanted to update. If there are any questions, happy to take them.
Okay, thank you, Dev. Very conscious of time, though. We still have a couple of things to get through. But yeah, does anybody have any comments or questions on Dev's report? No, I think that was great. I think you answered everything. Beautiful report. And of course, you can find further updates on the GFirst website under projects. Anyway, okay, we'll move on. Tim is giving us a guided to rent his buildings. If we can move on now to the business rate pool funding update and the SEDF funding proposals, if any. So I'll hand over to Andrew to bring us up to date. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, to say there aren't any SEDF funding proposals this time, so that might make the decision a bit easier. I'm conscious of time, and also that this isn't the most exciting subject at this stage of a meeting. But the report covers the outturn of the business rates pool from last year, the possible impact of the pandemic in this year, and also the potential for future pooling in future years. So if I focus on last year first, the report sets out that it was another really good year for the business rates pool. In total, the growth in business rates across the county was 19.4 million higher than the government expects us to collect. And that all feeds into the levy and pooling system. We were helped out last year by, as we discussed at previous committees, a sort of one-off release of provisions at Tewkesbury for the appeals that they had a number of years ago. But to cut to the chase, what that meant for Gloucestershire was that the gain through having our pooling arrangement was 4.85 million, which is set out in Table 2 of the report. And 970 of that goes into the SEDF, which is a fantastic outturn, really. I think my optimistic forecast before that was it would be about 900,000. So it's a really sort of positive move. 3.1 million to the districts to be shared amongst the 6, and 776,000 to the county council. So very, very positive in 2019-20. As you might expect, things in 2020 to 2021 are a little bit more complicated with the impact of the pandemic. The biggest impact, and this is set out in paragraph 10, is that businesses in the retail, leisure and hospitality industry have had 100% discount on their bill for the current year. And the current estimates from billing authorities are that's a reduction of £107 million in the business rates to be paid by businesses in the county. So that's obviously a major boost. The good news for that in terms of local authorities and the pool is that all of that money is compensated by central government, as is normally the case in business rates, where central government makes choices to reduce rates liability. They compensate the grant. So we're anticipating at least £100 million of grants to businesses, to authorities to compensate for that. The sticking point comes, and this has already been seen in some areas, if businesses have to close as a result of the pandemic and their premises become empty, then actually the burden falls back onto local authorities. So we have to keep a very close eye on that. So taking all that into account, there's a further table with this sort of estimate of the growth in this year, and we're still expecting to see about 4.5 million as a pooling gain in this year. That may well reduce as the year goes on, of course, and billing authorities revise their forecasts. But at the moment, we still expect to see growth. The position for future years becomes even less clear because essentially we don't know what the government's plan is around what they're called resetting the baselines. It's always been the plan that at some point they will reset the business rate system and take growth away from those areas of the country which have generated it and redistribute it to those that need it. And back in April, I think it was, the Secretary of State, who's just been mentioned, Robert Jenrick, made various announcements on things which had been delayed for local government finance, but his statement, and I'm looking at it now, said that the government is still determining how best to treat accumulated business rates growth. So we simply don't know the answer. Put simply, if there isn't any growth within the county system, then the benefit from pooling on a financial basis is minimal, because it's the growth that generates the gain. And it will likely be that on the balance of risks, it might not be worth proceeding with the pool. So what I suggest in this report is that the Section 151 officers put heads together, have a bit of a think. We might get some help in to do some modelling for us, and come back to the committee with a recommendation about pooling in future years. So I think that's probably the key points. It is very technical, this field, but I'm happy to take any questions as the committee may have.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anybody have a question for Andrew? No, I think the report covered everything. Are we happy with Andrew's action of getting the S151 officers together? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Excellent, brilliant. Okay, in that case, then we note the report and the position and make that as an action. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on then to Gloucestershire Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee update. And this is now with Kevin, chairman of that committee. Kevin, your last meeting was before our last meeting even, so I'm not sure you've got much of an update on that basis, but is there anything you'd like to bring forward?
Not really, no, I haven't got much of an update. We're going to be talking today about the meetings that we went out to different districts and about how we're going to report that back and how we're going to move forward. We're trying to improve communications with the districts moving forward. The reason we moved me to the end of the agenda rather than the beginning was also because then I can notice things in the agenda going through the meeting where I can sometimes comment on them on the scrutiny committee's behalf. A couple of things I have noticed, and I have had one thing change because I did email in between the meeting, is obviously we had the Golden Valley report last night, but it didn't go to the scrutiny committee. Now, if the scrutiny committee is going to be able to scrutinise this committee, it needs to have whatever information you have at the same time. So could we potentially have that, please? And also, could we
Kevin, can I just clarify that the information only went to the joint committee last night? We only received it last night. So you received it at the same time. It was just advance notice of what the presentation was going to include.
No, the scrutiny committee didn't receive it. I did, the scrutiny committee didn't.
No, it's just for the members of the committee to receive that, and then the information can be shared afterwards.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say, Joe, and I don't want to end in debate here, is the fact that how can we scrutinise what we don't know about? If we're here to scrutinise this committee, how can we scrutinise this committee if we don't know what this committee is looking at, discussing, or talking about?
I think the scrutiny items come from the presentation going forward. I think that's the way we will have to work. But I take your point. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also, could I ask officers that they do get these reports through to people in time so that people can actually study them? Yeah. You know, we have time to study them. That would be the point. And obviously, we're obviously all talking about our recovery from COVID, but I'm not quite sure whether we call it a recovery or what we call it, because obviously I'm not quite sure we're at the end of it yet. But obviously, again, if we can have those updates sent through to the committee as well, so that obviously that is one thing that the committee are generally asking an awful lot about. And I know, Patrick, you come and give us an update, and you'll give us an update this afternoon, but it would be useful to have any paper to go with that, because sometimes your time could be better spent asking questions that come out of the paperwork rather than you repeating yourself, if that's possible. And that would be basically it from me.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And noted, and your comments about keeping the committee informed. We'll take that away. Anybody else got any questions or comments for Kevin? No. Okay, then on that basis, thank you, Kevin, and I'll see you in an hour or so, a couple of hours. Right, the last element on the agenda is the forward plan. That's on page 41 of our documents. Joe, is there anything we need to add or change?
Just a couple of things. On the forward plan for the November meeting, we currently have, in addition to the standard items, and I don't know if officers want to sort of chip in here, an update on the King's Quarter regeneration, Gloucester. There's also the G1 core funding proposal that we may need to look at. And we've got from the meeting, I think from this meeting, the Golden Valley development sort of to come back, an update from senior officer group. And are we taking it that the recovery item is going to be a standing item going forward? That's the only question, really. So they are the points that the committee might want to comment on with input from officers. I'm not sure if Mike and Angela want to comment.
Chairman, not at so much at this stage. I think Joe's covered the points. There are reports coming back to you. We can, for the time being, make sure that recovery is on the agenda if that's the committee's wish. Thank you.
And Joe, just to confirm, Joe, that I've had discussions with David Owen and with Mike and Colin. There will be a application for SEDIF funding for the LEP for core funding match at the November committee. So I'll work with you on the sort of the paper for the decision and also work with Dev. And I'll pick that up offline.
That's good. We just need to be conscious of any key items going onto the forward plan. So I will check the date. That will be sometime in October that we need to get items onto the forward plan. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got any comments about the forward plan? No, we're all happy with that. Terrific. Well, it's just down to me to say, actually, we've got a slight conflict. On the forward plan, it says 18th of November, and on our agenda today, it says the next meeting is 16th of November.
I have many meetings. I think it's the 18th of November. I will send an email afterwards. Yes, I do apologise. Lots of 16th, right. 17th and 18th at the moment, but I will confirm the date after the meeting.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much, Joe. Well, I just say thank you to Joe and Laura for all their work on the committee. Thank you to all the officers as well who've come along and presented today. It's been very interesting once again. And thank you, members of the committee, for your time and input. And I look forward to seeing you all again on the 16th/18th of November. See you then. Bye.